everyone, this is Soraya back with the Purposeful Professional Media. In part 2 of the podcast, we delve deeper into Bianca Jackson's story. Moving from her childhood obsession with computers and her early desire to become an entrepreneur, we discuss her time building Brickrose Exchange, the lessons she's learned along the way, and how entrepreneurship continues to define her life and the impact she wants to have moving forward. All right, everybody. Hey, it's Soraya from the Purposeful Professional, and I'm back with Bianca, who has a very fascinating story. So we decided to hook up a part 2 because one thing, y'all know I'm committed to getting the whole story, not just part of it, the whole story. So after our first episode, I began thinking a lot about the work that she does with Brickrose Exchange and how powerful that is. So this segment will be focused on her work today and what she's trying to do, and really how she's trying to bring, AI, metaverse, these sort of emerging technologies to so many different people whom haven't been impacted by it. So my first question for you, Bianca, is like, when did you know you wanted to be in the tech field? Like, let's take it to like your recollection that you knew you wanted to be in tech. Like, what aspect of the technology fascinated you and made you know, hey, like I want to enter this field?
The funny thing is like I was 10, but it wasn't called the tech field then, right? So, this was way back when personal computers were just starting to become a thing in people's homes, where the internet having dial up, I'm not even sure if you even know what that means, but AOL dial up was a thing that some people had in their homes. And mostly rich families had it. It wasn't like in normal communities where I lived, right? So I grew up in a really poor community in Philadelphia. And so at the time, it was just like, I got exposed to computers. My fifth grade teacher told us to ask our parents for computers. I did, and I randomly got one. That's literally where it started. It started before there was a tech industry, right? And so I was just fascinated with this little box. This little box that, talked back to me. There were some voice prompts on it. I can type on it. I could ask it questions. And it was like my little best friend. And then from there, I started to be way more curious about what else these computers could do at the time. And so this is way at a point where before they even had user interfaces, right? So imagine just kind of typing something in and then something pops up on your screen. And so over the years, being able to learn how to program. In middle school, I learned how to type on a regular typewriter. So if you ever seen one of those, is phenomenal. But in high school, began programming, went to college, and took on this crazy major that was really new at the time, which was information systems. It was the cross between computer science and business. And so that's literally where it started. Like this little black girl had her little computer in a black neighborhood, and that was in the 90s, right? And so it's a long time ago.
Yeah, no, that was a long time ago. And thank you for going into your origins and how you've been able to develop, because it's so cool how like these little seeds, I always say the seeds become the trees, right? And I'm one of the things I'm saying this season is that we can look back at our past and we can actually connect the dots to our future. And I think that's what you've been able to do so wonderfully. But somewhere, somehow, you went from being that young black girl with the computer that you were playing with to being a Pulitzer Prize winning, okay, AR VR technologist. So I got to ask about that. I got to ask about that. So the next question is, I know that you're a pioneer in the AR VR space, and as you were the project manager for a Pulitzer Prize winning project, The Wall VR. Like, the listeners, we just want to know everything. Like, tell us about the project, the role you played, and also like how did winning this Pulitzer, especially being the first Black woman in that category, how did that change the trajectory of your career moving forward?
Well, so here's the thing. I always tell people it started with slicing fruit, right? And so a lot of people look at me strange as soon as I say that, right? And so where it started, I was leaving work one day. I was working for USA Today, and I see these guys playing Fruit Ninja in VR. And so this was the time back in 2016 where the headsets were literally connected to your computer, right? Like you couldn't get anything that wasn't. And so they called it tethered, right? So I see them playing Fruit Ninja. I walk over, I'm cracking up, like, what are you guys doing? They're like, oh, we're playing Fruit Ninja. We're doing some research. They're like, do you want to play? So I'm like, absolutely. So I put the headset on and I'm slicing fruit, I'm sweating profusely, I'm rolling on the floor trying to like, cut this fruit in half. And like I was so out of breath. Right. Once I finished the experience, I took the headset off and I peppered them with tons of questions. Like I must have stayed there an extra 20, 25 minutes just wanting to know like what did I just experience, how they were going to use this in their research, like just a bunch of stuff. So anyway, I leave the office not thinking much of it. I come back a week later, my boss goes, or my supervisor, I should say, you've been reassigned. And I said, reassigned where? She was like, the emerging tech team. So I said, you mean a Fruit Ninja team? And so we both started laughing, right? And so I must have, my curiosity, right? And for what they were doing and probably the quality of questions that I had, were definitely, I think, things that made me stood out because we had just gone through like a staff cut. So they literally just had gotten rid of their project manager. And I know at some point someone's telling them, oh, they needed another one. So anyway, I joined this team, and in the time that I was there, which was like about a year and a half before I left USA in total, we built three different products. So the first product we learned, something new, something different. It was just a room that surfaced up content from USA Today's journalists, right, and editors. The second product was we built out a model of the USS Eisenhower, which is a naval ship. And so we featured content from the different officers and what they saw on the deck and a bunch of stuff, right? Then the third one was building the wall VR, which was a Pulitzer Prize winning project. And so our only aim with that project wasn't to win an award. Like we really wanted to influence Congress. We wanted to influence people who had opinions either way, whether or not the immigration should be allowed or not allowed, but to really understand what the full conversation was. So we tackled everything from eminent domain, endangered species, rape, unfortunately, drugs, border control, like literally every issue that touched both sides of the border and what a fence or a wall would do. And so that was our aim, right? Like to just really educate people. We presented it in a very a bipartisan way, right? Like no bias on either way. Like we just really wanted people to understand. So we released it, I want to say, right before Congress was voting on the first time. So September 2020, 2017. And so by April or May, like early spring, late spring, early summer was when we got notification that it won a Pulitzer. And I think everybody was really surprised. By then, I had already left the company. I left the company by the time that the product was released. And so you can only imagine that, I'm still connected to people on Facebook who work at the company and they're like, hey, we want a post. I was like, what? Like it was just a crazy experience, especially when you go out to the world to do your best work and then people recognize it in that way. And it's like that wasn't even our intent. Our intent was making sure that people made an intelligent decision about like how they were voting and also could speak intelligently about the issues and not just be force fed or repeating different talking points that they just normally heard. So that literally was it. But the interesting thing though is in the project itself, we had to have some really serious conversations with the team. Something as simple as we have footage and content of deceased people, dead bodies, right? And I remember we had a whole conversation on whether or not, just because we had the content, should we actually put it in the environment? And so people could go either way on this, right? One part is like, oh, it's journalistic value, right? Like we need to be able to tell the whole story and all of the story. But the empathetic side of it was, and I think this was part of where I stood on the line was, if this was one of our family members, would we really want to have images of their deceased body in an experience for people to consume? Like, this is more than just your product, like, this is human life. And so we made the decision not to show those images. And it was a good decision because I think that when you really think and process what these people were on foot for, right? So I'm going to try not to go too deep in this, but just deep enough. if you want to compare this experience to the Middle Passage or anybody fleeing persecution or civil war, I think that there's many people or citizens and friends and relatives that we know who have either directly been impacted by this, and maybe it hasn't been this generation, but generations and generations and generations ago, or you may have gone to school with people or happen to be friends with someone whose family they ran away from civil war and persecution, like just many different ways. And so when you start to think about the human aspect of this, and kind of thinking about the terrain of like what it takes to make it through, let's just say some people walked as far as South America. And so if you think about that, South America kind of goes like this to Central America up to whatever. Like this isn't like people aren't in cars mostly, right? Like most of the time they're walking through deserts. And so when you take all that into consideration, being empathetic, the human thing to do is not to show that, but to talk about it, right? To really touch the heartstrings of people. And so that literally has become like the baseline of my work. So it's not like I like being called and regarded as a creative technologist, but I'm more of a humanist, right? And so that's the baseline, yeah, my work. And using technology creatively to tell these stories and to create these experiences where I thrive in at that intersection, right? And so the way I like to describe it is thriving at this intersection of innovation and equity, right? And so, how do we use one, not only technology for good, but how do we create projects that matter? Projects that go beyond the gimmick, that really tell a story, and a story in a way that touches hearts, minds, and souls, right? And so that has been literally the crux of my work ever since actually I was going to say from USA Today, but I think it started even earlier than that. While I was in college, I worked for the school district. So you can imagine having school district knowledge and how public education is funded and being on the back end. So I was on the administration side, but then learning all of this new stuff around technology and how technology was forming and how it was changing business and how it was showing up in public education. And so I don't know, I've always had a soft spot of like, how can we do more with less? But then also, how can we be just as impactful, right? And how can we be faster? And how can we build our capacity? And so all of those things just really resonate in the story. So hopefully that gave some context.
That gave all the context that needed to be given. I think that was amazing. I also love there's a couple things that you said that I wanna get into. I love that you said you are a humanist, right? So you don't necessarily consider yourself a traditional technologist. How has that humanistic view affected your ability to succeed in the tech industry? Because I think sometimes you talked a lot about empathy, and I think empathy is so needed, but I also think sometimes the human perspective, wow, it's humans using these devices, it's humans using the AR, VR, it's humans engaging in the metaverse. Sometimes the human aspect is deprioritized. So, like, how did you navigate the tech industry as a humanist technologist?
Well, I can tell you this, like I've had way more success after leaving corporate America because I no longer had to answer to people. I just had to answer to me and my higher being that I follow, right? God. And so I found that being a humanist as a creative technologist has been rewarding, not just for me, but also what I feel like the calling is on my life. But then also, different corporations have aligned themselves with the work that we've done, right? So, for example, like an American Express, a Comcast, a BGE, a Fiverr, AARP, Jack Daniels, and so on and so on, Meta, right, aka Facebook. And so, what that says to me is that we're heading down the right path of like the approach that we've taken with technology, and that there have been corporations that have signaled us out and said, hey, we see you, we're going to support you. Here's this grant money to continue to do the things that you're doing. And I think that that has really helped us carve out a space for the work that we do. And so it's so funny that you asked that question. I literally was just talking to a team of MBA students that I'm working with at Johns Hopkins. And so I continue to say the same things over and over again. They tell me that they appreciate me being like 10 toes down on what I'm about to tell you, which is technology can be a force for good or it could be a force for evil, right? And I think it goes to the intent on how people want to use it. Technology is not evil inherently, it's the intent in which you choose to use it, right? And so, with that, let's just take AI. So, a lot of conversations that I'm having now center around AI and its usefulness as far as like capacity building, but also its threat of potentially taking away human jobs, right? And so I told a client of mine, and I was dead serious about this. We had already worked on one project. We're gearing up to work on a second. And they sent me an article from Klarna or about Klarna. So Klarna is the platform that allows you as a consumer pay up front, you pay on the back end installments. It pays out the merchant 100%. So you're only dealing Klarna is only dealing with the customer on the back end. So anyway, they sent me the article about Klarna and how they laid off 700 people, but I think this was before they built like their AI chatbot. Like I got to go back to figure out what the timing was, but essentially how that one chatbot is doing the jobs of 700 people, right? So the client sent it to me, and I was like, okay, what you saying? And so they said to me, well, we want to build something that's going to help with customer service. Can you help us? And I was like, yeah, but with a capital BUT, but if you build anything, and I just want to let you guys know, and I'm pretty sure I've said this before, this is my conversation reiterating what I said to them. I said, I'm pretty sure I've already said this before, but I want to remind you. I don't mind me working or people in the company working on a solution that's going to help you with capacity building, right? Don't mind that at all. I said though, if we build anything that could potentially quote unquote take away jobs, we already got to be thinking the other side, thinking about the other side of the coin of where do we put these people, right? Like, I'm not helping you build anything that's going to help you get rid of 500, 700, or 1,000 people. I'm not doing that, right? Yeah, like we already have to be thinking about where are the people going in your organization. So they said, they reassured me, it was like, Bianca, yeah, that's not our goal. Our goal is to repurpose their work to do higher level tasks. I said, perfect. I'm glad that we understand each other. And like I was like, I just need you to know that's where I stand. And like if that was the way that you wanted to go, where you wanted to lay off people, I would have had to tell you that this is where we part ways, right? And so being very clear on how we intentionally move in this new technological age of, being able to impact so many different jobs. And I like to liken this situation to marijuana legislation, right? We have so many people still in jail, but now the marijuana business or industry is booming where they're giving out licenses, is regulated. I'm saying, but where was the conversation about releasing all the people locked up for distribution? Where's that conversation? Or being able to expunge the charges from their records so they can get jobs? Where was that conversation? And so, like, we can't be short sighted about the gains without repairing the ills or preventing the ills. And so that is where I draw the line in the sand. And so all the conversations that I'm normally having with clients, with potential clients, or even on podcasts like this is really talking about equity, right? Equity and putting yourself in a position of doing no harm or correcting the harm. So yeah, that's a whole nother episode all in itself. But
Yeah, once again, that's a word. And I feel that because there's so many people who would have accepted what the client was saying without even challenging it. It's like, oh, I see the money, I need this revenue, the team needs it, it's another account, whatever, whatever, without thinking about the human element. And I think that is what I just want to tell you, like, that's what makes you powerful. And I think as professionals, I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna tell you that. That's what makes you powerful. Because I think as professionals, sometimes we want to, align with the status quo, which, in business, it's revenue, it's profit maximization. It's all about the bottom line. And oftentimes when people come to you saying, we want the AI chatbot or tool, it's like, hey, our bottom line is suffering. We have too many people that we're paying. If we can just have this one machine do this, it's going to take away all this other payroll that we have to process. We will have more profits, shareholders will be happier, et cetera, et cetera. It's this very like, I would say this like clerical economic view that doesn't take into account the people. And you probably know the stereotype of the tech industry as being pretty cutthroat, as being pretty, we're creating things so that we can remove that middleman so that we can be more efficient, have more profits, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact that you stand for values in that space, you stand for other people in that space, I think that is what makes you unique and what makes you powerful because everybody ain't doing that. I even met entrepreneurs who are like, we're building this so that you don't have to hire this. People are trying to remove that human aspect. Do you see that as well? You see that.
Yeah, no, I definitely see it, and I think that. So let me be very clear on this, right? Just like we don't have milkmen today, right? Like I think we have some variations of milkmen. Do I think the milkmen need to go away? Yeah. Do we need to plan for the milkmen? Like where else? What else could they be doing? Right? Yeah, we need to do that. I think that there's a time and a place to start transitioning roles and jobs that don't really no longer serve the greater good, but then also just figuring out what transferable skills does that person or that body of people have, and then helping them to see where they should be going, right? So, for example, my sister was complaining, and rightfully so, about her job. She had been in banking for like almost 13 years. She still wasn't making over six figures. And then, like, during the pandemic, they gave her people to manage. And I was like, why don't you make six figures yet? And why are you managing these people without extra pay? Like, I was just really confused, right? And so she was like, I'm tired of it. I'm ready to get out of here. So I was like, well, you should go work for Coinbase. And she was like, what's Coinbase and where do I sign up? Like there was no resistance. And she was just really trusted my feedback to her. And I was telling her that Coinbase was one of the largest cryptocurrency trading platforms, blah, 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 whatever, whatever. So I went through my network. I found, two women that worked at Coinbase. They talked to her. They loved her. They got her an interview and she's been there ever since. Right. And so she survived every like layoff since she got there as a new employee, which is really awesome. I say all that to say is if I didn't already have the knowledge of how her transferable skills related to something that was new and emerging, she might still be at the bank. And she might have been one of the people in part of the layoffs. She could have been one of the people forced to go inside the build, forced inside the company because I think they called back all the employees. Now she works from home because guess what? Coinbase is fully remote and she can go work from not any country, but almost any country that she wants, depending on security protocol. But just thinking about there's so many people out there with transferable skills, but they don't know where to go. And so, of course, we're working on a little tool that's going to help solve that problem. So I can take, that mental model that I have and actually put it in a software to help people. But yeah, that's what we're working on.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. I think everything that you said is facts. And I also agree that it's this balance between like efficiency and productivity, like that progress, but also thinking about like what transferable skills can those who will be displaced, where can they be placed with those transferable skills? So I think that's also very powerful. And yes, I do want to get into what you're doing with Brickrose Exchange. So I remember on the pre-call, you called yourself a consultant, builder, advisor, and you talked a little bit about that client-based work that you do as you build Brickrose Exchange. Like tell the listeners about Brickrose Exchange. Walk us through the many roles you play within this organization and how through Brickrose Exchange have you embraced such a multifaceted professional identity.
Oh my God. So I mean, like, how much time you got? So again, I was talking to my team of MBA students that I work with at John Hopkins. Shout out to John Hopkins. But they said something today, as far as like in a very short title to describe what I personally do, which is like innovation design consultant, right? So what I've been able to do is sit within organizations to really see firsthand some of the problems and challenges that they're facing. And it could be around like community organizing or getting community buy-in, to figuring out how do we continue to upskill people for enhanced learning, enhanced training. Like the problem, it could be capacity building. Like how do we do more with what we have, without hiring more people, right? And so like we're finding more useful ways for people to work. And so essentially, builder, architect. I think I'm more like a scientist and an architect. Like I can sit within someone's organization and be able to say, you have these problems and these problems are blocking other problems. And then we can possibly walk you down like needs assessment and then really figure out like what innovation, and innovation doesn't always need to be technology. And I got to make that super clear. Like it literally could be a process change. It could be, establishing a process, standing up something new, or taking away something, right? But like really challenging people on how do we get the most out of what we have without overworking people, because you don't want to do that. Like at the end of the day, we're still humans. And so that's how I look at my work, being able to be a partner to, different institutions and organizations and businesses, to be a part of their team, but then also bring a like an outside consultant perspective. And so I do a lot of like the needs assessment work, and some other people on my team do too. And then be able to walk people into like these are different ways that you can solve these problems depending on like what do you think is the most urgent, like hair on fire type of situation. Like I'll ask them, but I'll also identify some things for myself. In one organization, one of the things that I had told the CEO, I said, right now you guys have like a almost like a strategic thinking problem, and I mean it in the most respectful way, right? And so what I mean is, how like you'll have different people, let's just say 5 to 10 people on a team, and you bring up a problem, and then everybody's talking about the problem, but very few people talk about the solution. So it's like, all right, who's the solution person who's saying something based on the problem, not just somebody coming in with, well, this is what I think you should do, and they have no context, right? Like the person or the people who can listen to the problem. And I think the other part of it too is leveraging what an organization or institution or a business already has. And then maybe what's like something small that you can add to it that's going to give like massive ROI, right? Like I don't want people thinking that they need to go buy like multi-million dollar systems. Like it's normally not really a system thing. It's normally starting with like, did we identify the right problem, and then do we have the right processes in place? If we don't, then how can we start cleaning those up? And also like what technology will help us do some of this work a whole lot faster where people aren't doing it manually. So it could be any of those things.
Yeah, so you covering everything from like the strategic thinking of like the way that y'all are thinking about the problem is not as, in depth or even analytical or even actionable, right? As it can be. Sometimes we spend time locked into the problem. I'm sure you see those organizations and there's no solutions coming up, and you're talking about that. So innovation design consultant, that makes a lot of sense. I think that title does make a lot of sense. And I think it encapsulates everything that you're doing, and it can't be easy. I do want to know, like, what is the number one thing that you see in organizations that you work with that you're like, this thing, to me it's obvious that it's not working, but to many other people it's like one of those like like cognitive flaws or biases. We can't necessarily see that this is not working, but as an outside consultant you can see it's not working. Like, what's the number one thing that you feel like a lot of organizations miss out on in terms of that?
Lack of execution. So let's just say you spent a whole half a day, even a whole day, talking about your problems. You might have the solution, but then the follow up to say who's responsible for doing it, right? Which is crazy. You just spent all this time talking. And I get it. Everybody wants to hear it. Everyone wants to get their voice heard. And so it's so funny. This actually happened recently. I was at a client meeting. So it's me and a bunch of consultants with their actual team. And so the CEO was talking, and she said that she wanted, like, we were having a conversation. She was like, oh yeah, and we might need to like get like a bill of rights, right? To be able to go out to the community and say, hey, this is what we want you to get behind. So me and one consultant was sitting in the corner. He was like, he tapped me on the shoulder. He was like, Bianca, check this out. So he's showing me like what he's prompting in Chat GPT, right? So I was like, all right, tell it to do this and tell it to do that. So somehow I think he had said something to her during one of the breaks, like, hey, we made your Bill of Rights, like literally right here on the spot in this meeting. And so she was like blown away. She was like, that's what I'm talking about. I say something to show up, bam, it's done. Right. And so it was a really exciting thing because she was so pumped about it. She talked about it and she goes, well, we're going to add this to the agenda when we come back from break. Like literally, this all happened in the span of 20 minutes. Right. But like being able to be present enough to hear the problem, then to have the solution of like, oh, we can do this real quick, like based off this, based off that, based off this, write this, right? And so I show people the process that we went through to kind of like create this Bill of Rights in the last 5 minutes. And it speaks to one, sometimes the lack of like just execution that people have. Like people are really good at taking notes. They got books, papers, and 3x5 cards and little notepads of notes, right? Just notes that they never execute. And it's just like, let's have really focused conversations where we're talking about maybe one or two things. And then, like, what is the solution? And then who's going to do it? Can we do that while we're here so that we can say, close the book on this? This is done. And now this becomes input for something else, right? And so, going back to the whole Bill of Rights conversation, so we created the Bill of Rights right then and there, right? We showed it to the group, one of the other consultants, and remind you, everybody that I'm talking about in this scenario are consultants, not even like the full time team, right? So the another consultant was like, "Hey, send that to me," right? She had her presentation the next morning. Why did our Bill of Rights show up in her presentation for the next morning? You see what I'm saying? So it's just like it's the educate, not education, it's the execution part that I feel like a lot of organizations aren't really that great at, and like fast execution and like targeted execution.
Yeah. I think because I'm here thinking like y'all got the Bill of Rights done in like 30 minutes. You know how many in certain organizations, how many meetings it would have been, how many revisions it would have been. It would have been they would have overcomplicated the process. It shows that you've made the transition from like, I guess like corporate employee to entrepreneur because you understand the power and execution. I always say entrepreneurship is a game of execution. Yes, we strategize, but you also have to move, especially when it's just you or it's just you and one other person. Y'all can't talk about it all day. We have to make quick decisions. And I think one of the things that frustrated me about the corporate environment is just the fact that there are so many meetings and there are so many deadlines in terms of we have to do this benchmark, that benchmark. And oftentimes things can be done very quickly, like you and your consultant showed. It can be done within 30 minutes. You don't have to make it extremely drawn out. So I think that is really cool. I'm also curious, and I ask this all the time, how did you build your team for Brickrose Exchange? Because I think what you're trying to do is so unique. Culture probably has a lot to do with it, like finding not just the good people, but the right people. How did you build your team? Like what team building or even like recruitment strategy did you employ to get to where you are today?
I'm gonna be completely honest. It's trial and error, right? And I think it's trial and error because one, I needed to get to a point of really understanding myself, right? So I don't think a lot of times as business owners, as founders, that we're really honest about who we are as people and how we work and what annoys us, what gets us excited. Because you got somebody who's really smart, but the way that they deliver, they speak or they deliver their work could be annoying to you as the founder, right, or as the owner of the company. Like they could be brilliant, but you're like, I don't like the tone of this person's voice. Like, and I know it's like really silly stuff, but all of that matters subconsciously, right? All of it matters subconsciously. So I think one thing is getting really familiar about your preferred working style. So I'll say this: I'm a Virgo.
Okay.
Think Michael Jackson, think Beyonce. I just had to accept it, right? I had to accept it that I'm super critical, right? Super critical, but I'm easygoing to a point. I don't necessarily like, yes, I want all the T's to be all the T's to be crossed, all the I's dotted, but I am open to taking really great like really great feedback, examples, and ideas. It's just you got to make it sound great. Like, don't pitch me something that you're not that confident on, because I'm just like, you sure? It's one, learning yourself, right? But then also creating and being able to tell people like what the expectation is, because we work, or the Brick Rose's work is so future focused and future forward. I tend to want to hire people who are interested in continuous personal and professional development. Like, these are the people who are like reading books and are watching movies, and they're doing random research where they're falling down the rabbit hole, and like they're bringing it back to the team. It's like, hey, I found this thing. Like, did you know this was? I'm like, no, tell me about it, right? Like, I love learning from people, and the good thing is about, I think, me is that I feel like learnings can come from younger and older, right? And so right now, I'm a part of an organization, or a part of a team working with HBCU students, and they're learning about like different technologies and how to build businesses with emerging technologies. And so one of the things that I tell them every week is like, I want you guys to come in here and tell me something I don't know. Like, I'm already a practitioner in the VR AR space. So you telling me about the history and Snow Crash and where the word metaverse came from is not very interesting to me. What is going to interest me though is if you tell me one of your favorite music artists just did a metaverse collaboration with a K-pop star, right? And then you're telling me about how many views they got and how much money, and how that then spent off, into something else, and how more people are attending metaverse concerts or concerts in virtual reality. I want to hear about that, right? One of the teams actually presented a slide that talked about the risk of adoption of VR and AR. And so it literally was a conversation that I was having that morning. I was like, can y'all send me the slide, right? So being able to surface up really great insight, ideas, and just trends, I think is really important for me in pulling together an environment where we're always constantly learning and we're teaching each other, but you're also teaching yourself. Like, that's really important to me. Like, I don't want somebody on my team looking for a checklist to do their job. If you need a checklist to do your job, you're in the wrong place with me, right? And this is just with me. I want the person that's going to be able to come in and say, all right, what are our goals? What do we aim? What are we trying to do? And then like, all right, how does my job fit into that? And of course, there's some walkthrough, there's some training, there's some stuff like that. But I would rather get the person who's the dreamer who can execute.
Yeah. Let me tell you. I'm like, where's Brickrose Exchange? Because I was looking for a startup to work for when I graduated from college, and I couldn't find a founder that had like your style of like, I need to be able to trust people to execute. A lot of the environments that I worked in prior to founding, the organizations I founded, I was frustrated because it's like, okay, you know that I have the intelligence, you know that I'm a doer, but you don't want me to do anything without there being a whole bunch of checklists and checkpoints. So I find it funny that you are that type of boss, yes, a Virgo, and you want things to be done a certain way, but at the same time you also choose people that you trust to execute correctly, but also bring you insights and strengthen you. So I think that's wonderful, because I was like, I need to ask you what type of culture you're building, because I think that has a lot to do with the company and the way that you like this conversation. The work that you do is so futuristic. I know you need specific type of people who can dream alongside you and think alongside you. And thank you for sharing that, as well as like the importance of knowing yourself as a founder. That's true. Like, are you a founder that likes to handhold? I know the founders who like to do like all of the project management stuff, and I'm just like, I'm similar in that like I need people who can execute alongside me and won't necessarily need everything to be spelt out. Not a Virgo. But I do need people who can execute and prioritize execution. And I think that's something that you either have it in you or you don't. So it can be kind
Yeah.
of hard.
Yeah, and so what's funny, even thinking about the whole Virgo aspect of it, of a Michael Jackson and a Beyonce, it's like certain people can vibe with that and some people can't, right? And so, and I think for me, I've gotten to a point where now I'm comfortable with it. that this is just not going to be a cup of tea for somebody, right? And that's totally okay. I'm not going to be a cup of tea for somebody, but then I'll find people where they absolutely think I'm phenomenal, right? And so, and they think Brick Rose is phenomenal. And so I think that, and that's the one thing that I wish that someone had told me when I left college and went out into the world. Just because someone's able to pay you what you think you're worth, right? Or suggest what you think you're worth, that still doesn't matter, because the culture and how people view you and how you show up in that space is going to determine the type of experience you have. And so it's interesting because like because I was randomly telling somebody this maybe like last week or the week before, that in one environment I was a complete rock star. You know, awards this, awards that, you know, pay raises and all that other stuff. And then the other, it was like DEFCON 4. Like I felt like every day I was entering, yeah, every day I felt like I was entering a war zone, right? And like, all right, how can I get out of here with all my limbs today? And so it's like, you know, one, I think that we need to do a better job of being honest with people about what our culture is, and the expectations. And I think a lot of times people tell you the HR answers. And I think that's the beauty of like running your own thing, like a small business or a nonprofit, where your team is like less than 10 or even less than 20. Is like you can really be, I feel like you can be honest about your culture, right? And, or at least being able to say things that filter people, how people filter themselves out. So
Yeah, no, I agree. And it starts with being honest with yourself and understanding. I love what you said about like different environments bringing out different parts of you. I personally I sucked at employed work. Like I literally have stories of fights with coworkers, like just like the spats. It wasn't good for me. It wasn't a good environment for me to be in there. Doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. No, but my mom was like, and my mom was always like, Saray, you have an issue with authority. She's just like, you're going to question and ask questions, and you're not going to just believe what people tell you. And I always felt like, okay, that's a bad thing. Like, no, 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 no. And after like maybe the third job that I was like, all right, I just don't like this stuff. I started looking towards entrepreneurship because I was like, okay, well, maybe if I do have this stubborn mind, maybe it's for a reason. So trust me when I say I've been in the situations where I'm like, I just don't fit in here. They're asking me to do this. I'm asking them why, or I'm saying that there is a better way. And when it comes from certain people, not sure if you experience this, but when it comes from a young Black woman, it's like, how dare you do what I told you to do? And I think like I had to recognize, well, this is the type of person that I am. How it translated towards entrepreneurship when I started building identity, the culture that I've formed, it's a learning culture. Everybody that comes through says they've learned a lot. I trust that people learn. And I'm not like super hard or super stringent on things, but I'm like, hey, well, what's the lesson in this? How can we learn? How can we build? How can we move forward? So I'm grateful that you're admitting like your personality does impact, number one, the type of people that work well with you. Unfortunately, I've had to let go of some people because it wasn't, they just didn't fit with me, you know, and I felt like I was a bad person. But in reality, it's like, it's not that they're a bad person. It's just that the culture's so dependent upon at the beginning who can work well with you as the founder, that if they don't fit that, you can't hold on to them. So it's a lot, you know, but thank you for expressing that.
yeah, let me jump in right there because you said something that I think a lot of people really need to internalize. Is this whole idea that someone's not necessarily a bad person. It's just your working style and you, the leader, is either they have the skill set, but then they also have the soft skills that's going to marry well, right? And so I'm looking at my little notebook today. I had to figure out of the interns that I interviewed last week, which ones were actually would be good fits for the environment, right? And so I don't want to say like culture fit or anything like that, but thinking about it of like everybody that I interviewed had really amazing skills, right? Super brilliant, super bright, all of that. But then I had to take it down a level further, even though it's a summer internship. The work that we do, like I said, we sit at the intersection of innovation and equity, right? So I needed to find, or at least try to surmise, who in that list was already doing like community work, that was already doing social impact work, like what the things that they're building for class and on their off time, does it somehow better society in some way, right? And you know, how they talked about their work, right? And so even that added a layer of screening, right? So I got the list down. Out of like the 15 interns that I interviewed, I think I got it down to like five. And even out of that five, one is definitely getting selected, but I might pick up two. And so it's interesting because I feel like as founders and as owners and as entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, however you want to identify yourself, we need to do a better job of being honest about who we are and also our environments of like who's actually going to thrive, not just survive but thrive. And it's more than just filling the position for a body, because depending on where someone is in their life, this experience could be really life changing for the better or for the worse. And so it's just like we just need to be honest about who we are, what we got going on, and then who actually can thrive in that environment.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it also, man, I've been thinking a lot about even like choosing investors. When you think of managing up, right? Like even choosing investors or advisors, like choose people that are aligned, right, with who you are as a founder and understand your process. Because I think a lot of the time I will hear of people. I know of people who have been ousted from their organizations by investors, obviously because there was a clash between your vision, what you thought was the way, and what they thought was the way. And they decided, hey, because we own the majority of the company, we're removing you. So I think like it's also very important to surround yourself in general on the journey with people who understand you and understand your quirks. Like I love that you talked about like owning who you are, because I think that there's so many times where we're made to feel ashamed of who we are. Like if you are detail oriented, it's like, oh well, you're just like super particular. I'm sure you saw the clips of like the Renaissance tour where Beyonce's mad because something got messed up, like because she's a perfectionist. But
Right, but I'm gonna say this: I'm a stand up for Beyonce on this, and so hopefully people get where I'm coming from. You pay $1 million out possibly every month to run this show, right? And if it's
yeah.
not millions completely, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's the first thing. People are getting paid off your labor.
Mm,
So if you don't
yeah.
show up for a show, people are not going to sit in that concert and watch her whole backup team dance. Like she got to come out there, even if none of them else come out there. She got to come out there, right? So she's paying hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars a month for this show. People are getting paid off her labor, right? I'm sorry, I'm rocking with Beyonce on this. You better do what you need to do.
Mm,
It's
mm.
it is really that simple. And also, the fact like if you saw the movie, right? So she showed in there she had knee surgery, I think it was, right?
Yeah, she did.
So she out there in high heels every night of this tour that was a global tour. So just as a human being, she's not even 100%, but she got to show up for every goddamn every date. Like if she want to get somebody a side eye, I don't care because I get you, sis.
Let me tell you, Beyonce is like she's like peak Virgo excellence. I mean, but there was a clip of like the horse, and I might send it to you. The horse didn't fly up, like it's supposed to fly up after the show, and she was like mad. Everybody was like, somebody's getting fired, like the tech team's getting fired. But I think the power of being like Beyonce is like the power of being like her is understanding that you can be excellent and it will drive you to be excellent. Growing up, I used to want to be a dancer. I used to dance growing up. And I was always saying like I want to dance with somebody like Beyonce, but if I was dancing with Beyonce, I knew I had to bring my A game. Like she does not accept any sort of mediocrity. And what I will say is you have to be ready for it, but being and working with someone like her will push you to be greater than you ever thought you could. So that's why I admire her leadership style. I am not a Virgo. I'm actually a Sagittarius. I'm a fire sign. I'm emotional as hell and very passionate and very impulsive. So because of that, I think for me, what I like now when I look for people that temper that side of me, like people that will ask me the questions to get me to think, okay, before you run off with this idea, like let's sit down and think about it. So one of my friends from Penn, she's joined me. She's a research she's doing a lot of research and data analysis. And not that I couldn't do that. Like I did research in college, but I'm such a fast mover and that I just like to just be in the thick of things. And I think I can benefit from people that slow me down and help me to reflect. Even my advisors, they are pretty much the opposite of me. And people would say, like, you're working with people that are your opposite. Do y'all clash? Yes, we do. But they slow me down and they get me to think about things that I wasn't thinking about because sometimes I can be so passion is me, fire's my element. I move very quickly. I, burn like a flame. So I have to be around people that sometimes can temper that. My mom she's like the opposite of me. So she often is like, you gonna run with another business? Like, please don't. She's like, please don't buy that domain. Don't even do it to yourself. And she keeps me focused. So I feel like I have to be around people who keep me focused. So I'm not like a super detail oriented person, but I think sometimes my pursuit of emotion and passion can outweigh some of the other factors that I have to just reel myself in. But I do admire people like Beyonce, Michael Jackson. And I always said I wanted to, even if I was a dancer, like I wanted to work with people like them because I feel like they will push me to be better. And I think it's great that you are that type of founder and that you see that the Virgo tendencies doing that. Because that will make a difference in the lives of those that you're managing. Like they will think back to themselves and be like, Bianca pushed me past what I thought was possible. And I never had a manager like that. And I wanted a manager like that. So that's powerful that you can give that to people.
I don't know, like kind of going back to Beyonce, I understand the side eyes and why people get fired is I don't think people really get a sense, and I'm pretty sure you might come across this as a founder of a nonprofit, that people really understand the blood, sweat, and tears, the effort, the money, the mental and emotional toil that you've put into this thing, right? And so when people are kind of joining your train or jumping on the bandwagon, right? They weren't necessarily there when, I like using the analogy of like they weren't shooting with you in the gym, right? Like they weren't
No, they
on the way
weren't.
while you were getting ready to go to the gym, like getting dressed. They wasn't with you when you grabbed your basketball, your racket, whatever it was. You walk into the gym, you getting there to the gym and like practicing shooting, running, whatever the field, whatever it was, like people see you do your thing, right? So that could be like playing in a championship game or running a track meet or showing up on stage and like, oh my God, that's great. I want to join you. It's like, but there was a whole process that happened before I even got here. And so for people who have never done that process, it's hard to understand or even to empathize with someone who has done it and just expects so much from other people. It's like, yo, if you really gonna try to jump on now, like just so you know, it ain't gonna be easy, right? Like, and some people take offense to that.
Hmm.
I know we've had our own separate conversations outside of this, of like just different people seeing what you've been doing with the nonprofit. And it's like, oh my God, this is great. And then they try to tell you what I love the most is when people try to tell you what you should be doing when you don't ask for it.
Yeah, they're always
But
doing
then
that.
also, right. Right. They're always doing that. But the other part is when they don't have the institutional knowledge of like, you are at year 5 in this, right? Like you've seen the evolution of this thing. And the thing that they might be suggesting is what you already considered in month 3 when you got started. And
Yeah,
like you're like, yeah, that
exactly.
was a great idea back then, and or that idea won't work in this market conditions now, right? So, but thank you for your suggestion, though.
But they hate. Can I just be real and say they hate when you do that? Like, I feel like they hate. No, they do hate when you. And I think my major problem as a founder is that I can come across as so nice at the beginning. And then people are like, "Oh, when I worked for Soraya, it was a nightmare." And it's like, "How is it a nightmare?" But I think people I feel like there's this thing of like, we have to accept the feedback. And then there comes a time where you're like, "All right, I'm good. I'm good. We're working on it. We're trying to figure it out." And people get annoyed at that. And I even had to like ask one of my friends, I'm like, "Why are people getting annoyed that there's a time where I say like, 'Hey, thank you, but this is the direction that we're pursuing.'" Like people get mad at that. And then they get mad at me. Because now it's like, oh, she's not as nice as I thought she was. It's like, wait. If we debate everything for hours and hours and hours and weeks and weeks, we're never gonna really move forward. So I think as a founder, there's always this clash of like, like you said, like you might understand something, but other people who you maybe have brought on as advisors and interns, you're trying to be respectful to their perspective, and you do want to be, but you also understand, hey, we've been there, we've done that. This is not the way, you know. So how do you deal with people getting mad though? Like, has anybody ever gotten mad when you were like, "That's your advice, thanks"? Like, have they gotten mad, or are they just like, "Oh, we're good"? Because I feel like people get mad when I say that.
Well, so here's a bit of advice. Why do you care?
You're right.
Don't
Why do I
care.
care?
Yeah, don't. But here's the thing: people gonna get mad when you trying to be the best version of yourself. People are gonna get mad when you know you're not trying to be the best version of yourself. So don't care. It sounds so heartless to say, but I'm just gonna say as a way of preserving your own mental sanity. Like, here's the thing: no decision is the wrong decision. Each decision is just going to take you down a different path, right? And then some
Mm,
decisions might take you back to a path, right? The thing is just don't give up, right? Don't give up, but then also no, this is gonna sound like some type of like wisdom you see on a nursery rhyme. It's like part like don't give up, but then also know when to change, right? If that makes sense. Like
yeah.
sometimes we could be working on something that has no life anymore. So it's time to like close that down and start something else, right? Or
Mhm.
we could be working on something that has a whole bunch of life, but now we're starting to get discouraged and we think it doesn't have life. So being able to tell when something still has life and still keep going versus when something is completely dead and time to close that chapter, right? And so
Yeah.
um, when it comes to people's advice, I would say, you know, definitely listen if you feel like that person's feedback is worth listening to. Because let's just say, for instance, someone is telling you something really great, but you don't trust them. The only thing that you're going that's going to permeate in your spirit is you don't trust them.
Mm.
And
Wow.
even wanting to execute on their advice, if you decide to execute on it, there's still going to be this underlying thread of I don't trust you. And so that energy is going to permeate inside of that idea. So don't do it. Right? Versus something could be a bad idea, but you trust the person. You're like, you know what, let me try that out. And even if it goes haywire like you did, you still don't feel that terrible about it because you're like, okay, I trusted that person. So I tried it, it didn't work. You know, I can still pivot to this, or, you know, my backup is over here. But I think we don't give ourselves enough credit to trusting our instinct. And I think our instinct is very different than ego.
Mm.
So I'm going to say that again. Our instinct and gut is very different than ego,
Yeah.
right? And so, and I know that not everyone's going to understand that, but for the people who do, congratulations, right? Sometimes we make decisions because our ego has been challenged, and now we want to show people that we can do something, or we want to show people that they should have invited us. We want to show people that we deserve to be in the room. And I do all the head movement and all that because that's the energy that comes with, right?
Yeah.
Ego. When you
Mhm.
get to a place where you can sit back and just say, you know what, that's a good idea, right? And like I feel good about executing that idea. I feel like it's going to be not only beneficial for us, but beneficial for whoever the beneficiary is, and that it sets us up for future success, right? You like, okay, I see this. Like, definitely go with that. Or you're like, you know what? I was already feeling some type of way about this situation, and then now this opportunity presented itself, and it just triggered that thing that I was already feeling about that situation. That's more instinct than ego.
Yeah.
Is the bravado of people should recognize you and you should be in the room and you should be at the table and why aren't they inviting me? And
Yeah.
so I get people wanting to be invited to spaces, but my thing is, why you want to be in a space where people don't want you?
Yeah. All right, we had a great time. We had a great time discussing so many things. I'm so grateful. One last thing that I like everyone to do is to complete this purposeful professional statement, just to kind of round it out. So I want you to finish a statement after me. My name is Bianca Jackson, and I'm a purposeful professional because.
So I am a purposeful professional because everything I do is done with intentionality. My relationships are intentional. The work that we do is intentional, and I show up with intention.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Bianca. Take care. Bye. Bianca's story is nothing short of an inspiration. Talking with her gave me the fire I needed to continue on my own entrepreneurial journey. Her insights on trusting your gut and divine wisdom are counterintuitive to the lessons shared in today's culture. This episode left me thinking, what is the role of innovation in building an impactful company? When should we trust the market research when building our company? And when should we trust our gut? What should be the key things we look for when seeking to build a team? How do we use AI inclusively and ethically to enhance our capabilities as founders? It's a lot to think about, but I enjoyed every minute of it. Bianca, continue to shine in your unique light in your own lane, and we are excited for you and grateful for your pioneering spirit and commitment to innovation in service of a broader community impact. Anyway, this is Soraya, and we're out with the podcast for the people, your career, and the culture. Peace. I'm out.